My family gave my brother a house and me a lottery ticket. So I did this when I won $134 million. Hey, everyone. For context, I'm Nathan, 29, and I've spent most of my life being treated like an afterthought in my own family. But this was the moment I realized I was done playing their game. Growing up, there was one unspoken rule in my family. My older brother, Eric, got the best of everything and I got whatever was left. It wasn't even something I questioned, it was just how things were. I was expected to accept it, to be grateful, to never complain. I still remember one particular Christmas that should have clued me in early. Eric unwrapped a brand new gaming console, the hottest one that year. His face lit up, my parents beamed, and it was like the world had momentarily paused just to celebrate him. And me? I got a clearance rack t-shirt from some plumbing company, 2 sizes too big. I was 7. Even then, I knew better than to say anything. Be grateful, my mom always said. Eric is older. He needs more than you do. That was the pattern for everything. Eric got a brand new car at 16, a sleek silver sedan with a red bow on the hood. I got a used bike with a flat tire and a half-hearted comment about how biking is great exercise. He got a fully paid college education. I got a stack of financial aid forms and a speech about learning responsibility. By the time I was old enough to process it, I wasn't even jealous anymore. It wasn't jealousy, it was just fact. Eric was the golden child. I was not. I convinced myself that all of this built character. That someday my hard work and resilience would mean more than the things Eric had been handed. I was wrong. Our house was the kind of classic, middle-class suburban home you'd expect. Beige siding, a basketball hoop over the garage, and a fridge covered in Eric's honor roll certificates. My mom loved Pinterest casserole recipes and my dad was the self-proclaimed king of backyard grilling. Summers were always the same. Eric would have friends over to swim in the neighbor's pool while I mowed the lawn. You're a team player, Dad would say, handing me a lukewarm can of generic soda as if that somehow made it even. But the moment that shattered any last illusion of fairness? Eric graduated from college. My parents threw him a massive celebration. A catered venue, a DJ, a custom cake shaped like a diploma. Over 100 people showed up, including relatives I didn't even know existed. My mom kept repeating, this is what hard work looks like. At the end of the night, they handed him a house. A fully paid-for house in a nice, quiet neighborhood. We're so proud of you, they said. You deserve this. I should have seen it coming. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened when I graduated a year later. No big party. No extended relatives. Just a quiet dinner at a chain restaurant. At the end of the meal, they handed me a single white envelope. I opened it, expecting maybe a check to help with my student loans. Instead, inside was a lottery ticket. We thought this would be fun. Mom said, grinning. You never know. You could hit the jackpot. I waited for the punchline. Some kind of joke. But no. That was it. My entire graduation gift was a $2 scratch-off ticket. I looked at my dad, hoping maybe he'd step in and say something, but he just shrugged. Well, you know, we spent a lot on Eric's house. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Because honestly, what else was there to do? Guess my only shot at getting something nice is winning the jackpot, huh? I said, holding up the ticket. No one disagreed. That night, I went home to my tiny, one-bedroom apartment. The rent was high, the walls were thin, and my upstairs neighbor had a habit of singing opera at 2 a.m. But it was mine. I tossed the lottery ticket on the coffee table and stared at it. The same lottery ticket my parents gave me for graduating college. It wasn't even scratched. I hadn't touched it since that night. It just sat there, mocking me with the promise of a jackpot I knew I'd never win. For weeks, I tried not to be angry. I told myself it was just money, that I didn't need recognition, that I had worked for everything I had and that was enough. But the more I thought about it, the more that sour feeling settled in my chest. My friends didn't help either. When I casually mentioned the lottery ticket gift one night, my buddy Chris nearly lost it. Dude, that's not just favoritism. That's straight-up disrespect. Hearing someone else say it out loud made it worse. I spent nights lying awake, replaying every single moment I had been the afterthought. The clearance rack shirts. The bike with the flat tire. The tuition I had to scrape together while Eric got everything handed to him. I wasn't just bitter, I felt like a fool forever pretending it didn't matter. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront my parents. That would be pointless. They'd just tell me I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive. No. I decided to disappear quietly. I found a new job, one that paid better. Signed a lease on a slightly bigger apartment in a different part of town. I stopped answering my parents' calls. They barely noticed. Eric, on the other hand, kept inviting me over to his house, the house our parents bought for him. Every time I visited, it felt like stepping into a shrine to his success. The walls were covered in photos of Eric in his cap and gown, Eric posing with his new car, Eric cutting the ribbon in front of his house. Mom was always there, admiring some new home renovation. Isn't this backsplash gorgeous? She gushed once, running her hand along the subway tiles in Eric's kitchen. We helped him pick it out. We. As if we had ever included me. The more time I spent there, the more invisible I felt. Every conversation revolved around Eric's job, Eric's hobbies, Eric's plans. If I mentioned anything from my life, a project at work, a funny story about my noisy neighbors, they'd smile vaguely and steer the conversation back to him. Then, after one particularly excruciating dinner, I went home and opened my junk drawer. There it was. The lottery ticket. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. The odds of winning were printed in tiny letters on the back, 1 in 300 million. I almost threw it away. But instead, I dropped it back in the drawer. That night, lying awake in bed, I realized something. I had spent my whole life waiting for my parents to see me the way they saw Eric. But maybe it was time to stop playing a game I was never meant to win. I didn't touch the lottery ticket for weeks. It sat in my junk drawer, buried under old receipts, tangled headphones, and spare change. Every time I opened that drawer, I saw it. But I never reached for it. Because deep down, I already knew that ticket wasn't worth anything. My parents gave it to me as a joke. A cheap afterthought. It wasn't a real gift. It was symbolic. A reminder that, in their eyes, I wasn't worth an investment. But one night, after an exhausting shift at work, I got home, threw my keys on the counter, and slumped onto the couch. I was too tired to coo and too wired to sleep. I reached for the remote. Then, for no reason at all, I grabbed the lottery ticket instead. The scratch-off coating flaked under my fingernail as I scraped away at the first number. Then the second. Then the third. I stared at the numbers for a solid minute. Then I checked again. Then again. Then I sat up so fast I knocked over my drink. Because I wasn't seeing things. I had one. I had, unbelievably, one. And not just some small amount. The jackpot. $134 million. I had to read the ticket at least 10 more times before it started to sink in. Even then, I wasn't convinced. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the lottery website, double-checking the numbers, making sure I wasn't misreading something. Nope. The numbers matched. I sat there, staring at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. Because suddenly, I wasn't just some overlooked afterthought in my family. I was a multimillionaire. And for the first time in my life, I held all the power. The next few days were a blur. I read every single article on how not to ruin your life after winning the lottery. I didn't tell a soul. I didn't quit my job. I didn't make any sudden, flashy purchases. Instead, I hired an attorney. Then, a financial advisor. I set up trusts, investments, protections, everything I needed to make sure this money didn't disappear overnight. And the whole time, a single thought played on repeat in my head. My parents have no idea. They had given me that ticket as a joke. A meaningless, thoughtless gesture. They had no idea they had just handed me a fortune. And the best part? I had no intention of telling them. I started making changes. First, I moved. Not into some extravagant mansion, just a beautiful modern home in a private, gated neighborhood. Something comfortable with enough space to stretch out and breathe. Next, I paid off every single penny of my student loans. I upgraded my car not to a flashy sports model, but to something reliable and high-end. The kind of car that didn't rattle when it hit a speed bump. And then, just because I could, I took a month-long trip to Europe. First-class flights. Luxury hotels. Private tours. I lived like royalty. And the whole time, I didn't post a single thing about it. No Facebook updates. No Instagram stories. Nothing. Because I didn't need the validation. I didn't need them to know. Yet, the first time my parents noticed something was off was at one of Eric's backyard barbecues. The whole family was there, same crowd, same conversations, same Eric-centered attention. But this time, when someone asked me how work was going, I didn't give my usual polite, oh, same old, same old. Instead, I shrugged. I left my job a couple of months ago. Every conversation at the table stopped. My mom blinked. What? Yeah, I said, spearing a piece of chicken with my fork. Decided to take some time off. Travel a bit. Eric chuckled, shaking his head. Must be nice. Mom frowned. But how can you afford that? I smiled. I made a couple smart investments. It was technically the truth. Eric scoffed. Well, don't get too comfortable. The real world doesn't let you just take time off whenever you want. I didn't argue. I just smiled and changed the subject. But my mother? She wasn't smiling. She was suspicious. And that's when I realized it was only a matter of time before they found out. I thought I had more time before the secret got out. I was wrong. Because a week later, my mom called me out of nowhere. Hey, sweetheart, she said, her voice unnaturally sweet. I was just wondering if you could help us with something. I already knew where this was going. She continued, your dad and I have been looking at vacation homes and we were thinking about putting down a deposit. But money's a little tight right now and we thought maybe you could contribute a little. I almost laughed out loud. A vacation home. For them. The same parents who had given my brother an actual house and handed me a lottery ticket as a joke. I took a slow breath. Oh, that sounds nice. But why would I help pay for it? Silence. Then she let out a light, nervous chuckle. Well, Eric has been contributing a lot lately. We just thought it would be fair if you helped too. Fair. I bit back a laugh. Yeah, I don't think so, I said. She didn't like that answer. Well, don't you think it's time you started giving back to the family? She snapped. Something inside me finally snapped too. I had spent my whole life giving. Giving up opportunities, giving up recognition, giving up my place in this family so that Eric could shine. And now, the moment they suspected I had money, they expected me to hand it over. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain. I was just going to show them exactly how things work now. And that meant cutting them off. For good. I didn't respond right away. My mom was still on the line, waiting for me to agree. To tell her, of course, Mom, I'll help. You've done so much for me. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch out between us. Then finally I said, you didn't think it was fair when Eric got a whole house and I got a scratch-off ticket. Dead silence. For the first time in my life, my mother had nothing to say. She recovered quickly. Oh, sweetheart, you know that was different. Eric was starting his life. He needed help. So did I said. She sighed, irritated now. You're going to hold on to something that small? We thought the lottery ticket was fun. You could have won big, you know? I almost laughed. I did win big. But she wasn't going to find that out from me. Not yet. So instead, I just said, yeah, I guess I could have. Too bad it didn't work out. Then I hung up. That should have been the end of it. But if there's one thing I've learned about my mother, it's that she doesn't let things go. The next day, my phone blew up. Texts from my dad, my aunt, even some distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Your mother is very upset. You need to apologize. Why are you being so selfish? Family helps each other. Eric has been handling everything on his own. It's time you stepped up. It was textbook manipulation. The same thing they had been doing to me my whole life, convincing me that I owed them something just for existing. This time, I wasn't playing along. I didn't answer a single message. And when my mom called again that evening, I let it go to voicemail. She left 3 messages. The first was guilt. I don't understand what's gotten into you. We're family. We should be able to count on each other. The second was frustration. I hope you know you're breaking your father's heart with this behavior. I raised you to be better than this. The third? Anger. Fine. If you want to be selfish, that's your choice. But don't come running back when you need something. I sat back and stared at my phone. Then, without hesitating, I blocked her number. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more guilt. No more obligation. No more being treated like the lesser child. I kept living my life. Traveling, investing, actually enjoying the success I had built for myself. Then, about a month later, Eric showed up at my door. I wasn't surprised. He was always the golden child, but he wasn't stupid. If Mom and Dad had sent him, that meant they suspected something. I opened the door and leaned against the frame. Didn't expect to see you here. He gave me his usual confident smile, the one he always used to get what he wanted. Can I come in? I didn't move. What do you want, Eric? His smile faltered. Mom's worried about you. I raised an eyebrow. No. She's worried about her vacation home money. He exhaled. Look, man. I don't know what's going on with you lately, but cutting off the family? That's extreme. I shrugged. So is treating one kid like royalty and the other like an afterthought. Guess we all have our extremes. His jaw tightened. Then he said it, the thing he came here to say. Did you win the lottery? I didn't react. Didn't blink. Didn't smile. Just stared at him. Because there it was. The reason he was here. I could have lied. Could have laughed it off. Told him he was crazy for even thinking that. Instead, I let the silence do the work. Finally, Eric sighed. Come on. Mom and Dad said you quit your job, moved, and started traveling. Where's the money coming from? I tilted my head. Why do you care? He hesitated. I don't. I just think that if something changes, we should be in this together. We're brothers. I laughed. We were only brothers when it was convenient for you. He rolled his eyes. God, you're so dramatic. And you're so entitled. I crossed my arms. I don't owe you anything. I don't owe them anything. Eric stared at me for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, You did win, didn't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the look on his face told me he already knew. That was when things went downhill. Because Eric didn't just leave that day and accept things for what they were. No, he ran straight back to Mom and Dad. And once they knew, they decided they were owed a piece of my fortune. The first sign that they knew was the email. My mom never emailed me. She was the type to call, to send passive-aggressive texts, to leave guilt-tripping voicemails. But an email? That was different. I opened it, already knowing what was coming. Subject, we need to talk. It started sweet, which was a huge red flag. Honey, we miss you. We just want to talk. There's no reason for family to be distant over misunderstandings. You know we've always supported you. I almost laughed. Then came the real reason for the email. We're struggling financially right now, and your father and I were hoping you could help. Nothing major, just something to get us back on our feet. Family takes care of family, after all. There it was. The moment they suspected I had money, they suddenly needed help. I didn't respond, but ignoring them didn't make them go away. Over the next few days, the flying monkeys started reaching out. My aunt, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, even one of my mom's church friends, all with the same thinly veiled message. Your parents have always done so much for you. Isn't it time to give back? They just want to talk. Why are you being so stubborn? Eric told us everything. Why are you keeping this to yourself? So Eric ran his mouth. Figures. Then finally my dad called. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. I answered. His voice was calm, like this was just another casual father-son chat. Hey bud, haven't heard from you in a while. I leaned back. Yeah, been busy. Pause. Then, listen, your mom and I were just wondering, did something happen? Eric mentioned you came into some money. I smirked. That right? Yeah. A beat of silence. Then, is it true? There it was. I let the silence stretch out. Then I said, why does it matter? Dad sighed, like I was being difficult. Look, your mom and I aren't asking for much, just a little help. We gave you so much growing up. I cut him off. No, you gave Eric so much growing up. Silence. Then, with forced patience, that's not fair. I laughed. It's exactly fair. He got a house. I got a joke gift. Now, suddenly, you need me? You're still our son, he said, his voice tight. Funny. They hadn't treated me like their son when they were handing out life-changing gifts. Then he tried a different approach. You know, we always planned to leave you something in the will. So that was the play. Bribery. Dangling an inheritance like bait. I leaned forward. You mean the inheritance that's going to Eric? Pause. Then, that's not set in stone. I smiled. I think we both know it is. More silence. Then finally he sighed. You're not going to help us? Not a chance. His voice turned cold. Well, don't expect anything from us when the time comes. I let out a breathy laugh. I've never expected anything from you. That's the difference between me and Eric. And then, I hung up. That should have been the end of it. But my mom? She wasn't done. Because the next day, I got a legal notice in the mail. A formal demand for financial contributions toward the family estate. They were trying to sue me for money. I stared at the paper in disbelief. Then I called my lawyer, because if they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. I held the legal notice in my hands, reading it over 3 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But no, it was real. My parents were attempting to take me to court for money they had no right to. The letter was full of fancy legal jargon, but the basic claim was this: since I was financially successful, I had an obligation to contribute to the family estate. Translation? We found out you're rich and we think you owe us a cut. I had to laugh. They didn't want me to have money. They wanted access to it. And that? It wasn't happening. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. He read over the notice, let out a long, tired sigh, and said that this is complete nonsense. That was reassuring. Can they do anything? I asked. No judge in their right mind would entertain this, he said. It's a weak attempt at legal intimidation. I smirked. So, what do we do? He leaned back in his chair. We counter. If they want to play games, let's show them it's going to cost them. I nodded. Do it. Because if they thought I was just going to roll over and hand them money, they were about to be very disappointed. A few weeks passed, and then I got another email from my mom. This one was long. A full, dramatic breakdown of how I had betrayed the family, how I was selfish and ungrateful, and how my refusal to help was causing irreparable damage to our relationship. She even dared to say, I hope you know we're only doing this because you left us no choice. I let out a humorless laugh. I had left them no choice? They were the ones trying to extort me legally. I didn't respond, because at this point there was nothing left to say. Then came the phone call from Eric. Unlike Mom and Dad, he didn't try to guilt me. He went straight to anger. You're letting this happen? He snapped the second I answered. Letting what happen? I said casually. He scoffed. You know damn well. You could end all of this right now by just giving them something. I smirked. Oh? Like how they gave me something when you got a house and I got a scratch off. You're so petty. I laughed. And you're so entitled. You don't even need the money, he said, like that was some kind of argument. That's the difference between us, I said. I don't need it, but it's still mine. Eric was fuming. Then in a low, angry voice he said, "You're dead to this family." I smiled. Finally. And I hung up. A few days later my lawyer called me. They withdrew the case. I blinked. Already? He chuckled. Yeah. Guess they realized it wasn't worth the legal fees. That didn't surprise me. My parents weren't the type to spend money if they weren't guaranteed a return. So now, after all their scheming, all their manipulation, all their attempts to guilt and threaten me, they had nothing. And I had everything. I thought that was the end of it. My mom had one last trick up her sleeve. And it was her most desperate move yet. I should have known my mother wouldn't go down that easily. She had lost in court. I had cut them off completely. By all logic, this should have been the moment she accepted defeat and moved on. But no. Instead, she pulled one last, desperate stunt. Wasn't just going after me, was going after my reputation. It started with a phone call from an old coworker. I hadn't worked at my previous job in months, but I still kept in touch with a few people. So when my friend Matt called me out of nowhere, I picked up. "Dude," he said, "you might want to check Facebook." I frowned. "Why?" "Your mom's posting some interesting things about you." My stomach dropped. I opened my laptop, went to her profile, and there it was. A long, dramatic post about how I had abandoned my family, how I had become greedy and selfish, and how I had somehow stolen money from them and left them in financial ruin. It was a full-on smear campaign. And the comments? Full of sympathy for her. "I can't believe your son would do this to you. After everything you've done for him? Heartbreaking. You raised him better than this." I stared at the screen completely numb. She wasn't just trying to guilt me anymore. She was trying to turn everyone against me. I didn't engage. Didn't comment. Didn't message her. Didn't try to defend myself. Because I knew how this worked. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to blow up, to lash out, to say something she could twist into proof that I was the villain in her story. I wasn't playing along. But that didn't mean I was just going to sit there and take it. So, instead, I made one phone call. To my lawyer. He sighed when I explained the situation. "Defamation is tricky," he said. "But we can get her to take it down." I leaned back. "What do we need to do?" "First, we send a cease and desist," he said. "That'll scare her into backing off. If she keeps going, we take further action." I smirked. Perfect. The letter went out the next morning. And just like I predicted, within 24 hours the post was deleted. But before she removed it, she made one last edit to the caption. "I'm being forced to take this down, but the truth will come out someday." Unbelievable. Even in defeat, she still had to act like the victim. A few days later, my dad sent me an email. It was short. No dramatic paragraphs. No manipulation. Just one line. "Your mother is devastated. Are you happy now?" I sat back, staring at the screen. Was I happy? Honestly, yeah. I was happier than I'd ever been. Because for the first time in my life I was completely free. And there was nothing they could do about it. The silence was deafening. For the first time in my life, my parents had no power over me. No control, no manipulation, no guilt tripping. And I thought that would be it. But I should have known. People like my mother don't just give up. She had one last move to play. And this time she sent Eric. I was at home, enjoying a quiet evening, when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. And when I opened the door, there he was. Eric, standing on my porch, looking pissed. I sighed. "You know I have a phone, right?" He shoved his hands in his pockets, his jaw tight. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "Depends. Are you about to ask me for money again?" His eyes narrowed. "It's not about money." "Oh?" That was new. I gestured for him to go ahead. "Then talk." He hesitated, like he was trying to find the right words. Then he said, "Mom's not doing well." I waited for him to elaborate, because this was part of the script. Step 1, guilt. Make me feel responsible. Step 2, exaggerate. Make it sound like my fault. Step 3, demand a solution. One that, conveniently, required my money. So I just raised an eyebrow. "Not doing well how?" He sighed. Frustrated. "She's just stressed, with everything that's happened. The lawsuit, the family turning against her, the financial issues." I laughed. "Oh, you mean all the consequences of her actions?" Eric clenched his jaw. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." He let out a slow breath. "Look, I get that she messed up. All right? I'm not saying she didn't. But she's still Mom." And there it was. The final plea. A last-ditch effort to pull me back in. But I was done. I had been done for a long time. So I shook my head. "Eric, let me ask you something." He crossed his arms. "What?" I stared at him. "If I were the one who lost everything, would Mom be here for me?" He hesitated, just for a second, and that second told me everything. He knew the truth. She wouldn't. Not in a million years. I stepped back. Then I think we're done here. His face hardened. You're not going to help? Nope. You're unbelievable. I smirked. And you're predictable. Then, before he could say another word, I shut the door in his face. That was the last time I ever saw them. No more calls. No more emails. No more fake concern. They had nothing left to take from me. And I had everything I needed. A new life. Real friends. A future that was completely mine. No guilt. No obligations. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.